Right, good morning, everybody. This video recording will help you with the 5 alternative strategy tasks that our students were given in place of the time that they would normally spend in schools. So yes, I've got 5 alternative strategy tasks. 4 of them will be marked with a rubric, and the second one will be marked with a memo. I'm going to go through them. I'm not going to read everything in the assignments. I'm going to point out a few important things, and then I will just quickly go through the rubrics. I'm not going to read everything because I know that you can read, but maybe just to point out a few things where you could go wrong. Right, so let's look at that. Just share my screen with you quickly. Right, so I basically tried to cover some of the outcomes that I had in my or that I have in my study letter for teaching practice. And so the first assignment is about teaching in a multicultural classroom, because that's one of the outcomes in our teaching practice study letter. So you will see that this assignment 1 or task 1 of the alternative strategies is divided into 3 parts. The first part is where the students will have to do research about teaching in a multicultural classroom, where they will have to look for tips, teaching approaches or strategies, possible resources they could use, activities, activity ideas, games they can play, etc. So they will have to do a bit of research before they can actually do part 2, which is then planning a language lesson. So you will get a lesson plan, but you will not mark the actual lesson plan. You will use the rubric to assess the research, the lesson plan, and the reflection then. So yes, they have to plan a language lesson. They can choose any topic from grade 1, 2, or 3 to demonstrate their positive attitude towards teaching in a multicultural class. Their lesson must show teaching approaches or strategies, ideas, activities, resources, games, anything that will show how they included the different cultures in their classroom. So also just a warning to the student was that they must think about the practicality of doing some of the things. Yes, so just take that into consideration as well. And then the third part is reflection. They will do that on their lesson plan in the phase called reflection. So where they would normally reflect on their lesson, but now we have asked them to reflect basically on how they accommodated the learners from different cultures in their lesson. So they have to reflect on that, okay? So explain how they adapted the teaching, or how they chose their resources. Yes, so they have to reflect on that, okay? So the rubric that you will use to mark this task is basically to give marks for the research part. You will have to read through the whole lesson, obviously, because on the lesson plan you will look at the referencing, see what sources they used, and then you will give a mark out of 5 for the resources used, looking at the variety of the resources. And but that information will be on the lesson plan under the referencing section. Then also, when you read through the lesson, you will see that there's evidence of, well, hopefully you will see that there's evidence of research done about different cultures in the classroom. So you will look for that evidence there to see if there was excellent evidence of ideas, strategies, activities, games that they got from the sources they used. So you will just give a mark for overall evidence of research done in the lesson plan, on the lesson plan. Then part 2 is actually the lesson plan itself, planning the lesson. So here you are going to look at, criteria 1 there under part 2 is evidence of inclusion of multicultures in the lesson phases. So obviously they won't have evidence of this in every single phase on the lesson plan, but somewhere on the lesson plan, and it will probably be in the development, there should be some clear evidence of how they included the other cultures or the different cultures in the classroom. So that is what you'll be looking for under this criteria. Then 2, the uses of strategies, activities, and resources. Was there creative adaptation of teaching strategies, activities, and resources to accommodate the cultures or not? And then give the marks according to the mark allocation, the rubric at the top, in the gray. Then part 3 is the reflection, where we ask them now to reflect on what they incorporated into their lesson to basically include the different cultures. So did they demonstrate excellent insight into self-reflection about their adaptation and choices to implement, accommodate these cultures in the classroom? So you will have to decide in which category they fall. So yes, then you will just give an overall mark here. So you can make comments on the lesson plan as you go through, but focus on the task, the fact that they had to include the different cultures in their classroom, and that must be the focus when you go through the lesson plan. So it's not a case of, okay, let's see how good you've written out your outcomes, like you would mark the lecture assessment when you go to assess them in the school. It's not going to be exactly the same. You will read through the lesson and you can make comments here and there. I would appreciate that if you do, but the focus will be on the accommodation or not of, or the inclusion or not of the different cultures. Okay, that's task 1. Then if we look at task 2, this is the only task that will be marked with a memo, and I actually included the memo. I added it in. I copied and pasted the strategies from my assessment guide, but I included the memo here for you. Okay, so if we look at the second one, it's all about the extramural activities in school. Seeing that the students were only exposed to this for 3 weeks, we thought that it would be a good idea to get them thinking about this a little bit more. So let's look at the different parts. The first part is based on their in-school experience. So there's specific questions for specific marks. The meaning of extraculture or extramural activities. Sorry, I said extraculture, extracurricular. The second one, reflecting on the extramural experience at the school. They were placed in. I told them that they could use their second and their first year because I knew that some of the students will email me and tell me that they didn't do a lot of extramurals in their first 3 weeks. So there's not much to focus on or to reflect on. So I told them that they can reflect on their first year. They must just indicate that in their reflection. So you can look for activities that they were involved in. You can give 3 marks for that. Explain the involvement and what each of these activities, what the involvement entailed, will be 3 marks. And then also how they felt about this, did they hate it? I'm thinking about things like doing break duty. Did they hate the break duty? What was their task, or what was their involvement during break duty? Did they just walk around, or do they actually have something to do during that time? And then how did they feel about that? Did they enjoy it? Did they learn something from it? Etc. Etc. Okay. Then part 2 is some research work that they have to do. You'll see there's question 3 says that they must look or they must do research based on the value of extramural activities for the student, teacher, or the teacher. So this is not the value of extramurals for the learner in the classroom, but it's the value of extramurals for the student or for the teacher. Okay, so they have to choose 4 values and explain that for 12 marks. Okay, so each of the 4 values will get 3 marks, which I will explain on the memo shortly. Then question 4 was, many schools do not have many extramural activities to choose from. So I asked them to think of a talent or a hobby that they have that they would want to start as an extramural activity when they start teaching one day. And I said that they have to basically cover the following. They have to give a description of the activity for 2 marks, the resources that they will need or the learners would need for 2 marks, the benefits for the learners for 2 marks, and also how the implementation of this activity will benefit the student, right? So all of that, all those bullet points for 2 marks each. So that's the second task. So yeah, you've got your memo for question 1, possible answers, but question 2, where they had to reflect on their teaching practice experience. You will have to use your own discretion. Yeah, there's no set thing because everyone would have been involved in different things. So you will have to use your discretion there. And then when it comes to part 2, where they did the research, where they had to choose 4 values for student teachers or teachers for being involved in extramurals. I've got possible answers here for you. You can see there's a list of things that you could possibly choose from. You can look at those. I've also added some links that you can look at if you want to look for more ideas. But I'm 100% sure that all of you will be able to come up with values for a teacher or for a student teacher for being involved in extramural. So yes, some questions or answers that you could consider, but please, once again, use your own discretion with regards to this. So there you will, let me just go back quickly. You can see I highlighted it. I said any 4 values. So we asked for 4, so mark the first 4. If they've got 5, 6, 7, then you ignore 5, 6, 7, and 8. You mark the first 4 values. You give 1 mark for the value. So if you look at this, the first one, then you'll give a mark for conveying enthusiasm for the profession. So you give that as the kind of the heading for the value, and then any 2 marks for the explanation of that value. So for each of the values, you will allocate 3 marks, right? Then question 4 was the whole issue where they had to choose something that they would like to implement as an extramural in the school. And once again, yeah, because every student will have something else, a different answer there, you will have to use your discretion when marking that. But please take into consideration when they answer, yeah, they have to describe the activity for 2 marks. They have to list either resources that they would use or resources that the learners would use, the benefits for the learners, and also how the implementation of this activity will benefit them as the student teacher. So that's the memo for 2. The third task, this is a video of teaching a small group in maths. We know that CAPS stipulates that students should, well, not just students, teachers should be using whole class teaching strategy, small group teaching strategy, and independent teaching strategies in each maths lesson, which we all know doesn't happen. And we also know that our students normally complain because their teachers won't allow them to do small group teaching because it's very time consuming. So often our students don't get exposed to doing small group teaching in the school. So therefore, I thought it would be a good idea to get them to do this in a safe environment where they're basically going to do a mock teaching of a small group, and they can get someone to video them doing that. So let's look at the different parts of this strategy, of this task, sorry. So they have to plan a lesson phase. Please note, yeah, they don't have to plan a whole maths lesson. They're going to use the PRAC 201B, which is the maths lesson plan template, which you can see I've indicated here in the yellow highlighted section. Yeah, so they must use this template, but they will only complete the development phase where they will select the small group teaching strategy as the way to teach the work. Okay, you will see here that I told the students they can use the small group teaching strategy either to teach a new concept to the learners or to revise it with a group of struggling learners. So some students may use it as using the small group to teach a brand new concept, or to use the small group to help a group of students who struggle with a concept. Okay, it doesn't matter, it doesn't really matter, they will still have to complete the development phase of the lesson plan. And please also note that they have to consolidate the small group teaching lesson. The small group teaching part of their lesson. So on this lesson plan, they will only complete the development phase, and under that development phase you will see there's outcomes for the small group, there's assessment strategies for the small group, and a description of the small group activity. So they will have to complete all of that, and then how they consolidated the small group teaching activity. Okay, so that's what they will have to complete. Nothing else on that lesson plan needs to be completed. Okay, we have placed a restriction on this particular lesson, so we force them to use a strategy called I do, we do, you do in the small group activity, which I will explain shortly. So they have to use this teaching strategy in their video. Okay, so planning it, so they will complete the development phase, and then when they get to their video, they will have to do a mock presentation of the small group. And in their video, they have to include the grade they're going to teach, the topic they're going to teach, and obviously because of the restriction, they will have to use this I do, we do, you do approach. Okay. In their instructions, there's a small explanation of this teaching strategy, but it basically boils down to the fact that when I start working with these learners on the carpet, with these 6 or 7 learners in the group, I will start off by doing a sum or two to explain or to show them the steps. So I will do the first demonstration, basically. Okay, then we do means that you will then allow the learners to work as a group, or if you want to, or depending on what the student decided, the student can also decide to pair the learners. So 2 learners will work together, and they will work on maybe 2 or 3 sums, but they will work together to assist each other, right? And then finally in the small group, you will get the learners to do their own sums so that you can actually see whether they've grasped the concept or not. Okay. So that is what they will have to show in their video. You also have to show their consolidation of their skill or the concept. So they will either, when they consolidate the lesson, remember that is recapping what they just taught the learners. So they will either verbally test what the learners know and what they don't know, or they will maybe give the learners a sum to do, to see whether they can actually do it or not as a consolidation. So they can ask 1 or 2 questions maybe, and then maybe they will give them a sum to do to see whether they actually understood what was explained to them. So this video needs to be uploaded onto YouTube again, and they will have to paste the URL of this video on the final page of their lesson plan. Please note that apparently it's not possible for you to take that URL and to type it in on your laptop to go and search for it on the internet. So in this case, our students will have to email that URL to you, okay? So you can ask the student to email it to you, or otherwise we will ask the students to make sure that they send the links to their assessors. As soon as all our students know who will be marking their work, we can let them know to provide you with a URL so that you can just click on it to watch the short video, because obviously that will be included in the rubric. Then the third part is a bit of research, where they have to look at excuse me, the value and the challenges of using small groups in a classroom. So they have to list and explain 4 values of small group teaching, and they have to list and explain 4 challenges of using small group teaching strategies. So again, 3 parts, and we will look at the rubric now. So if we look at the rubric, part 1 was the lesson plan where they have to complete the development phase. So yeah, you will give marks for the outcomes that the students listed. For that small group activity, you will give marks for the assessment strategy to see whether it linked to the outcomes that the student listed there. Then you will also give marks for the explanation of that small group activity. Did they give a clear explanation of how they would go about teaching the students the concepts? Did they incorporate the I do, we do, you do skill in their explanation? Did they refer to the use of their resources, etc., etc.? So that is the lesson plan phase. Then when you get to the video, did they mention the grade and the topic in the video? Did they use the use the I do, we do, you do strategy in the video? Was there evidence of that, and how well did they do that? And then did they consolidate, recap, or summarize the main concepts in the video? So once again, sorry, I just want to go back to the first part. Yeah, obviously when you go through the lesson plan, you will make comments about the outcomes, the assessment strategy on the lesson plan, and then so that the student can understand the mark that you've given them, yeah, as well. So please make comments on the lesson plan so that they know why you decided to give them the 3 out of 5 for the outcomes and not a 5 out of 5. Okay. And then the third part is the research part. So yeah, they have to list 4 values and explain, and they have to list 4 challenges and explain. So yeah, you will look at the explanation of those values and decide whether it's worth 0 to 8 marks, and you give marks and write a general comment, yeah, for the student. Right, we're getting there. Task 4. This task is all about the use of resources. So yeah, you will have to watch a short 8-minute video. It's a very short video where teacher teaches a maths lesson on symmetry. Students will have to answer the following questions. They have to list the resources that they could identify in the video. Secondly, they have to explain why the teacher used each of the 5 resources that they listed here. I gave an example of the incorrect and the correct way of explaining the use of the resource, and I used the flashcards that the teacher used right at the beginning of the lesson. So the students were told that they cannot use the flashcards because I used that as an example. So anything but the flashcards can be listed in question 1, and everything but the flashcards can be used to explain why the teacher used that particular resource in the lesson. Okay. So there I gave them an example of what we want and what we don't want. Then question 3, yeah, we've given them a list of 6 criteria of a good resource. And now we've asked them to select 3 of their resources and to basically explain how each one of these resources met or did not meet the 6 criteria that we explained. So yeah, I took the flashcards again and I did a example for the students so that they can see what is expected of them. So you can see each of the 6 criteria listed here. And I chose 3 resources. Well, they will have to choose 3 resources. I used the flashcards. They can choose any 3 resources except the flashcards to explain how that resource met or did not meet these 6 criteria. And there you will have to use your discretion. If you think that it met the that particular criteria, but the student says it didn't, then you'll have to look at what the reasons was that the students gave and use your own discretion there, right? Then the 4th point, in lectures, they were taught that real life authentic items or realia, things brought from home for learners to actually see, is always a good option. So yeah, I asked them to list 3 possible items or realia items that they could have brought, that the teacher could have brought to the classroom to show the different lines of symmetry. And please note, it's to show the 3 different lines of symmetry. So she did the horizontal, vertical and diagonal lines of symmetry in the lesson. So they have to list 3 things, but each one of those items, one of them must show vertical lines of symmetry, the other must show diagonal, the other must show horizontal. Right, so they're not allowed to use the objects that were seen in the photos of the PowerPoint. So the teacher used beautiful pictures of the Taj Mahal, of a flower, of a zebra. Students cannot use that. Obviously, teacher can't bring a zebra to the classroom, but she cannot bring a flower to the classroom because that was already used in the PowerPoint. So it needs to be something that was not in the PowerPoint. Okay. So here's the rubric that we will use to mark this. The 5 resources listed, obviously it will be 0 to 5 depending on how many they listed. The explanation of why the resources was used in the class, you will see they have to select 5. So for each one of them, you will give a mark out of 5. So that's resource 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So you will give a mark out of 5 for how well the reasons for using that resource was explained by the student. And then question 3 was where they have to explain if the 3 resources that they selected met or did not meet the 6 criteria that I gave them. So you will give them a mark out of 6 for the explanation for each of the 3 criteria they selected, and then that will give you a mark out of 18 eventually. Finally, the last alternative strategy task is all about lesson facilitation. I basically gave them this section out of the CAPS documents taken from the AIMS, where it says that these are the learners, the type of learners that we want to produce. And to do so, we do have to facilitate some of our lessons. And this is why I chose to base this 5th task on this particular topic, right? So the first thing that the students will have to do is to read through a discussion or an explanation of what facilitation is, what is the difference between facilitation and teaching. So you don't have to read through all of that. That was their job. They have to read through all of this and then do some more research if they need to. And then based on this information, they will get to part 2, where they now have to use what they've read in part 1 or their own research that they did based on what facilitation is and how it's different from teaching. They now have to plan a life skills lesson that will show how they facilitated learning. So they can use any topic from term 2. Please note there, it's from term 2, grade 1, 2, or 3, from the life skills CAPS document. And obviously it will have to come from the beginning knowledge and the personal and social well-being content area. So this lesson, or they will have to complete the whole lesson plan, and it will have to showcase how they will facilitate a lesson. It will probably be in the developmental phase or the development phase of the lesson plan. So they will use Prac 201A, which is the general lesson plan template, to complete all the phases except the reflection. They won't teach this lesson, or they didn't teach this lesson, so therefore they will not reflect on this lesson. Remember, they will only reflect on lessons that they actually taught. So they will complete the whole lesson plan, but this time the focus will be facilitating something in the lesson. So they can do whole class teaching and do facilitation, or if they choose to facilitate everything in the development, then that's their choice. Okay. There's a list of things that are basically just kind of told students to consider when they plan the lesson, which I'm not going to read to you. And I also gave them a link that they could use. I actually also gave them a video of a lesson where the teacher facilitated the lesson. So they had examples of things that they could possibly look at to help them to plan this lesson. So it's a lesson plan that you will have to read through here. So yeah, you can see for planning the lesson, what are you going to give marks for? You're going to look at the outcomes, the assessment strategy, to see if it is there a good explanation, and is it clear and achievable in a facilitated lesson, those outcomes. And then also, is the assessment strategy linked to the outcomes? Creation of an environment for facilitation. So was there detailed explanation of how the small groups will be coordinated or how discussions will be guided in the classroom? Fourthly, the resources used to provide guidance in the discovery process. Was the excellent use of documents, resources, questions, a step-to-step guide for learners to actually discover what they're supposed to discover. So you will have to look at that when you read through the lesson. So marks will be given here, but comments will be made on the lesson plan. Obviously, you will make a final comment at the bottom with regards to the whole assignment, but please make a few comments on the lesson plan when you read through the lesson. But once again, the focus is now on facilitation, okay? Also the activities, you gave the learners, did they provide them with good guidelines to obtain the information that the teacher wanted them to get? So something that you have to consider when you look at the activities that the students selected for the learners to actually get the information that they wanted the learners to get. The consolidation of the facilitated lesson, which would be a small group teaching strategy, because that's the one that was explained to them in the part that they had to read through. So yeah, you can see whether they consolidated the learners' findings successfully or not, and then your overall impression of this lesson with the focus on facilitation. So you can see here an excellent lesson that is focused and shows evidence of research done, obviously, based on facilitation. And that is it. These marks, each one of these tasks are out of 50. You will capture the mark on the rubric or on the, for task 2, where there's no rubric but only a memo, you will capture the mark on the actual assignment. And then eventually you will have to capture the marks on the mark sheet that will be provided. On the mark sheet, there's a section for the lecturer assessment. Then there's a section for the alternative strategy tasks. For the second year FPs, there's 5 alternative strategy tasks. We didn't include the totals because for every module, ITP or Teaching Practice 300, TPIP 300, it differs. So we didn't put the totals in. So you can put the totals in on the mark sheet, which is 50. So in the end, there will be a mark, a total mark out of 250 for the 5 alternative strategy tasks and a percentage. Okay, so that all these marks will be captured on the mark sheet. Although it's in the POE, these tasks, the marks will be captured on the mark sheet and not on the POE rubric. Okay, the POE rubric, sorry, is only used to mark the admin documents, the formal lesson, the informal lesson, and the reflection. The alternative strategies will be marked on their separate rubrics and their marks will be captured on the mark sheet. Okay. I really hope that going through the 5 tasks assisted you with the marking, or will assist you with the marking, and also with the use of the rubrics. I hope that you find the rubrics user-friendly and that it won't take too much of your time. Good luck with the marking, and I do appreciate your the hard work that you'll have to put into the marking of this, and I want to thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and good luck with the marking. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I will answer your questions as soon as I can. Thank you very much. Bye.